There's just something special about a footballing rivalry, but who's had a better 22/23 season so far? You or your arch rivals? That's what we're going to be discussing in today's video. Now, it would be quite basic to say, you know, a team in a higher division that's finished in a higher place has obviously had the better season, but that's not what we're quite going to be discussing today. Instead, we're going to be taking into consideration which fan base between you and your arch rivals has had more enjoyment out of this season. For instance, I'd argue a team going up and being in the promotion hunt in League One probably has a bit more of an enjoyable ride than a side that's just mid-table in the Championship. But we're going to be taking loads of factors into account for today's video. If you do go on to enjoy, do leave a like, but without any further ado, let's jump into it. And it's a big rivalry we're starting out with off the bat, Birmingham and Aston Villa. Who has had a better campaign this season out of these two great rivals? I think I have to edge with Aston Villa in this circumstance. To be fair, prior to Villa appointing Unai Emery, it was probably quite evenly split. I'd actually argue Blues fans were having a better time at the start of the season. You know, Villa were very much struggling under Gerrard. Blues started off the season really well under John Eustace, but they've sort of levelled out from that point, and Villa have continually got better since that appointment of Emery. And considering they're doing the business in the Premier League, I have to say Aston Villa have had the better season than Birmingham. Another great rivalry, Blackburn and Burnley, and to be honest, I think that both sides have had really enjoyable seasons so far. From a Blackburn perspective, I don't think their fans were expecting to be so deeply into a top 6 hunt by this point of the season. I definitely don't think the Burnley fans were expecting to be runaway champions either. What makes the season even sweeter for these two sides is they both made it into the FA Cup quarter-finals and could even go on and progress from that point. But out of the two of them, of course Burnley have had the better season this time around. They've played some of the best football we've seen in the Championship for absolute years, and when these two met in the Championship, Burnley obviously got the one over on Blackburn in that game as well. After that, for Blackpool and Preston, to be fair, I think that both fan bases have been grumbling a lot throughout the season. That's certainly been the vibe that I've got from both sets of fans. Obviously, with North End this season, we are contently mid-table in the Championship. Don't have any fears about relegation or anything like that, but a lot of underlying factors, off the pitch issues, brand of football and things like that have caused quite a few grumblings, and from a Blackpool point of view, the fact they're so deeply entrenched into this relegation zone at the moment, the appointment of Appleton didn't work out to begin with, then the flip of that to McCarthy hasn't gone their way either. The only thing that goes in Blackpool's favour out of who's had the better season between us two is the fact that they did beat us at Bloomfield Road by 4-2 earlier in the season, but taking everything into consideration, no doubt about it, Preston have had a much better season than Blackpool. Between Bristol City and Bristol Rovers, there's really not been that much between these two in terms of the overall seasons. Bristol City, comfortable mid-table in the Championship. Bristol Rovers, comfortable mid-table in League One, obviously after solidifying themselves from that promotion from League Two last time. Bristol City fans have seen a little bit more goal-mouth action in terms of goals per game, but Bristol City have been doing it in a higher division. Obviously enjoyed that cup run on top of it as well, so I'll just give the edge there to Bristol City for doing the business in the Championship. But I mean, I'd love to see these two going head-to-head once again, an underrated derby. Between Cardiff and Swansea, it's two fan bases who haven't had a great time generally throughout this season. Cardiff in the midst of a relegation battle, and Swansea who have just massively fallen behind everyone's expectations of them at the start of the season. You know, you would say Swansea have had a better season. They're higher up in the Championship just about, but in terms of expectations at the start of the season, I'd argue that Cardiff are probably closer to matching them than Swansea are. I think a lot of us expected this Cardiff side to be in and around the bottom half of the table, particularly with coming into the season with a fairly inexperienced manager and an overall squad rebuild that they were doing. Whereas a lot of people thought, myself included, that this Swansea side under Russell Martin might have been gearing up for a top 6 push, but the football hasn't been great to watch at either side this season, but given Swansea are higher up in the league and they did beat Cardiff in the reverse fixture, I've got to say that they've had the better season. Coventry and Aston Villa. To be honest, Coventry fans, you're going to need to help me out in the comments down below, because I wasn't 100% sure when making this video who you would consider your biggest rivals to be, so do let me know down below. And I was doing a little bit of research on this. I think different generations of Coventry fans consider maybe different clubs to be their biggest rivals, and there are a few of them that I could have picked out for this one, but I've gone with Villa in the end, so we're just going to go ahead and roll with it. To be honest, I think if Coventry do sustain a top 6 push this season and give it a real good go, in these final few months of this season. I'd actually say that maybe they've had a bit more of an entertaining season than Villa, who have been, a little bit up and down. Start of the season under Gerrard, but pulling it back now under Emery. Huddersfield and Leeds, it's not been a great season for either of these fan bases. They're both in the relegation zone as of recording. If I had to be pushed on it, I think I'd say Leeds have had a better season. I think they stand a better chance of survival in the Premier League than Huddersfield do survival in the Championship right now. And yeah, with everything going on around both clubs, I'd have to edge towards Leeds, but don't think their fans have been particularly happy with how this season's gone. Staying with Leeds then for Hull and Leeds. I know that Leeds are playing in the division above at the moment, but if you were to do a general survey of happiness of how Hull fans are feeling at the moment compared to Leeds fans, I think you get a hell of a lot more happy Hull City fans. I think all the Hull fans there really bought into this team under a senior. Obviously the way they've been able to develop under the new ownership and things like that, and just in general it's not been a great year for Leeds in the Premier League, has it? Luton against Watford. It has been great to have this rivalry back in the Championship, and out of these two you have to say that Luton have had the much better season. Now the thing that Watford do have in their advantage is that when these sides met at Vicarage Road, Watford absolutely wiped the floor with Luton in that game, and it's worth remembering. But in terms of the overall season so far, how happy each fan base is right now, there's absolutely no contest about this one. Luton have been brilliant and Watford have been under par for the majority of the season in my view. Between Middlesbrough and Sunderland, I've picked out Sunderland as Middlesbrough's biggest rivals, but some Borough fans may edge towards Newcastle or someone else, but I've gone with these two. Out of these two, you'd have to say Middlesbrough. Certainly didn't seem that way over the first few months of the season. Sunderland going very well, and it has still been an excellent season for them in the Championship, but the heights Middlesbrough have hit under Michael Carrick and still what they could achieve for this season, I have to give it to them as having the better season out of these two. Between Millwall and West Ham, I think you have to admit that Millwall have had the better season. I know that West Ham are in the league above and are also in Europe as well, so there's that to take into consideration. But with Millwall well in the top six hunt compared to West Ham, who have massively fallen below expectations this season in the Premier League, despite all the money they spent and the fact that they are still, very much in this relegation battle. If we see, either Millwall going up or West Ham going down, it would be brilliant to get this rivalry back in one shape or another next season. But yeah, Millwall had the better season for me. I think they've had the much more enjoyable ride. Norwich and Ipswich, the East Anglian derby. Who's had the better season out of these two rivals? Do you know what? For a first time in a very long time, I'm going to say that Ipswich have had a better year than Norwich this time around. Ipswich fans, they've seen more wins, they've seen more goals being scored, and just in general, I think a bit more of an enjoyable season. Now, don't get me wrong, if Norwich do end up making it into the top six and they do, somehow get promoted to the Premier League, then obviously they've had the better season, all things considered. But there's every chance that Ipswich do go on and maybe pit Plymouth into that second spot in League One, and if they do so, get promoted in the process. It's been a brilliant season for them, hasn't it? QPR fans, who would you consider to be your biggest rivals? I've gone with Fulham for this instance, and I think, we all have to admit Fulham have had an excellent season in the Premier League this time around. Start of the season, I was fearful for them in terms of another relegation. We've sort of fell into that path previously with Fulham, walking the Championship and then going down at the first time of asking, but not this time. Marco Silva's added to that core of players he had in the Championship, who absolutely blew us all out the water last season, and they've been a great watch in the Premier League this time. For QPR, on the other hand, not quite the same can be said about them. Obviously it is early days under Ainsworth, but been a very rocky road for them this season. Once again, Reading, who would you consider your biggest rivals to be? I've gone with Oxford, but there were one or two others that I could have gone for. In terms of who's had the more enjoyable season out of these two, Oxford have fallen below expectations in League One this season. Obviously Carl Robinson's time at the club there has come to an end, and while the football at Reading hasn't been massively enjoyable this season under Paul Ince, a lot of people, myself included, did have them down as relegation candidates this season, and so far, bearing any point deductions that may be coming their way, they have stayed clear of that relegation battle. Rotherham fans, who would you consider your biggest rivals to be, for the purposes of today's video, I have gone with Sheffield Wednesday. Now, Rotherham put in some really good work this season in, establishing themselves as a championship club, but got to go with Sheffield Wednesday here. They're running away with the title in League One. It's been a brilliant season for them, and yeah, fully expecting them to be back in the championship next season, and if they continue going on their current trajectory, and very looking forward to that. But between the two of them, got to say Wednesday fans have had more fun this season. Oh, this one is an interesting debate though. Which set of fans has had more fun this season? Sheffield United fans or Sheffield Wednesday fans? Now, if the Blades do hold on to second place in the championship, they've made it this far in the FA Cup as well, I'd have to go with the Blades, earning promotion to the Premier League. But there's every chance that if they do continue faltering, that second place slips away from them, with Borough looking to pounce. And if they don't go up through the playoffs and Sheffield Wednesday end up playing them next season, then I've got to say that Sheffield Wednesday will have had much more enjoyment out of this season, not only because of their successes, but also poking some fun at their rivals. No doubt though that these two sets of fans have had a hell of a lot of fun this season, both being in the top two for the vast majority of the year in their respected leagues. And I'm expecting Sheffield United to go up this season, but it would be great to have that rivalry back in the Championship, wouldn't it? When it comes to Stoke and Port Vale, they've had pretty similar seasons this time around, just in different leagues. Stoke in the Championship, Port Vale in League One, but the standings of each team at the moment in terms of where they are in the table is fairly similar. Port Vale not having that many worries, I don't think, at this stage of going down with the points they've got on the board, but a similar thing also occurring with Stoke. I think a few more positive shoots that we've seen from Stoke though under Alex Neil, I'd sway it in their direction as having a better season. Sunderland and Newcastle, oh, what a gift to see these two great rivals going at each other once again. For all the great work that Sunderland have put in this season to build upon that promotion from last time, establishing themselves back as a championship club, and maybe even staking a claim for a top six race, there's no doubt here that Newcastle have had the better season out of the two. The trajectory Newcastle have been on since the takeover has been absolutely miraculous, and yeah, to make it into a cup final, being the top four hunt, no doubt they take this one. West Brom and Wolves this season have sort of had seasons which have mirrored each other. Both started out really poorly in the league, but after a managerial change have each got themselves back on track and to whereabouts we thought they'd all be at the start of the season. Wolves, going from the bottom of the table up to 13th as of recording right now. Still very close between them and the relegation zone, still very much in that dogfight, but yeah, things have been a lot better over these past few months, considering where they were at the start of the season under Bruno Lage. And the similar sort of things can be said about West Brom, really, how they were playing under Bruce compared to the bounce they've got more recently under Corberan. But if Wolves stay up and West Brom don't make the top six, there's no doubt that I'd classify that as the better season for Wolves. And then finishing today off for Wigan and Bolton, who's had the more enjoyable season out of these two? I think it has to be Bolton, doesn't it? Bottom three of the Championship or top six of League One. The goals Bolton have scored this season, some of the football they've played at times, I think overall it's just been a much more enjoyable season for them, really, despite being in the lower league. The promotion hunt in League One this season is absolutely bonkers, and I can't wait to see what the three sides that come up this season are like next year in the Championship. Bolton very well could be one of those sides. But guys, there we have it. There is my take on each Championship rivalry and who I believe has had the better season this year. Do you agree with my selections? Do you think you've had a better season than your rivals this time around? Let me know down below. If you went to enjoy, make sure to leave a like, do stick around and subscribe for some regular Championship content. And I'll see you all in the next one.